Hi, and welcome to the Bitter Draft, Episode 3. I'm Phil, and today we're going to be discussing paper currency. So what is paper currency? Paper currency can never be money itself. There's a big confusion, and when I've been talking to people casually, they say, oh, I'm buying things with dollars, so the dollars must be the money. No, currency is not money. It can be money when it's hard currency, but currency is not money. And paper currency can never be money because it has no intrinsic value. The intrinsic value of the non-monetary value of money, which is gold and silver in the global system, is what gives it its monetary value. So if you get rid of money and just go back to a straight up barter system, the first thing that will happen is that people will still hold gold, still hoard gold because it's beautiful. And the people like to wear it. It has value besides its monetary value, and the fact that it has that value is what gives it its monetary value. It's not that people said, "Oh, gold can be a medium of exchange." It's that people liked gold, and gold became a medium of exchange. This is a very important concept, and everyone needs to understand it, because we're about to go into the stuff of nightmares. So paper currency, because it's not money itself. It's a promise for money. It's a credit. So if I gave a silver coin to my brother and I said, hey, here's a silver, if my brother borrowed a silver coin from me and I gave him a silver coin, right? And he said, okay, I'm going to pay you back, and I might pay a little interest or something. But let's say he's just going to pay me back. And he writes on a piece of paper, I owe Phil 1 silver coin. That's paper money right there. I can use that currency to go to a mutual friend of ours and I say, hey, my brother Dave is owing me a silver coin, and I want to buy this rake from you, so I will give you this IOU from Dave, and then Dave will just give you the silver coin, right? That's all it is. It's just the promise for money later. So paper currency, it's a credit for money, right? Paper currency requires banking. I don't know why I have money there. But paper currency requires banking, public or private. So you can have, banking money, I'm sorry. I might edit this part out. Start this part over. Paper currency requires banking money. And when I say banking, I mean taking money, which is gold and silver, and putting it into a bank. Which doesn't have to be like Wells Fargo. What I mean by a bank is a vault that can then issue paper notes off of the money in the vault. Now, it could be a private bank that issues bank certificates, which is what we had in America. It could be Fort Knox, where and then have the government issue gold certificates off of that, which is what the dollar used to be. And I'm going to get into the dollar. The tragedy of the dollar is going to take several episodes in its own right. We're going to go through the history and why it's going to be a waking nightmare in short order. But let's get through the building the bricks first. So you have to have money to issue currency. If I just went to my friend to buy the rake and I said, hey, give me that rake, I'll give you 5 Phil points for it. He's going to say, well, what's a Phil point worth? Well, it's true. I mean, what would I say it is worth? Well, I could say it's worth 5 somethings in my house. Let's say it's worth 5 forks in my house. Well, then I've just turned these Phil points into fork futures, right? I just said, I promise to give you 5 forks. So if it's not related to a physical good, it has 0 value. So the number on the paper currency, if you see $5 or $10 or 1 pound, 10 pounds, a euro, 10 euro, whatever, the yuan, 500,000 yuan, or whatever denomination they use, the numbers on the paper currency represent a certain amount of money. So, and it used to be fixed. So a dollar was 1/35 of an ounce of gold. But once Nixon closed the gold window and allowed the gold exchange rate to float, it's now about 1/2000th of an ounce of gold. It's whatever the exchange rate between gold and paper is the value of the dollar. or of the paper currency. So if the exchange rate collapses to, let's say, $10,000 a dollar, then a dollar will be worth 1/10,000th an ounce of gold. And prices in other goods will reflect that. It's not like it's just the exchange rate between gold and dollars stays like this, or fluctuates wildly, and everything else stays stable. No, because the gold is the money. What happens over here affects everything else. Everything else. So if the dollar goes to infinity against gold, right? So no one will sell any amount of gold for any amount of dollars, then the link is broken, and the dollar will not be able to buy anything else. So if you think of a cup of coffee back when the dollar was $35 an ounce, coffee was about 5-10 cents a cup. Now that it's $2,000 an ounce, coffee has risen to, if you go to Starbucks, $7-8 a cup. Now it's not a perfect conversion because there's been a lot of globalization and technological improvements that have made coffee cheaper in real terms. So you can't just assume that the world stays completely static, and so that the price is just a pure accurate reflection of it. But it is a rough reflection of it. So as the exchange rate between dollars and gold goes up, which it must do as they continue to print more, the price of coffee in dollar terms, everything else being held equal, will mathematically go up as well. Now it might go down because if someone invents a faster way to deliver coffee, or some other new invention or a better way to grow coffee, that can push the price down. So the real world innovation can disguise the inflation, which is what they depend on to steal from you. All right, let's go on to the next one. Oops. There. All right, characteristics of paper currency. So when the paper currency is trusted, it's far more efficient, safer, and lighter, and more accurate than money. So it is when trusted, it is excellent. It's safer because instead of carrying a big bag of gold or especially silver is very obvious if you're carrying a lot of it, because it's a big, it's like those big money bags that you see people carry in the cartoons, right? Instead of that, you can carry a note. If you carry a 500-pound or $500 paper note or a $100 paper note, you can stick that in your wallet. It's not even a thick wallet because from the top it looks exactly the same as a $1 bill, so no one will even notice, right? So you can carry notes in infinite number of denominations, and no one will know that you're carrying large amounts of money, promises for money. No one will know you're carrying large amounts of promises for money. So it's much safer. It's also lighter. Just carrying gold from one place to another place is expensive and requires a lot of security, and just the physical energy to move heavy metals is, it's expensive in its own right. And it's also more accurate than money or hard currency, because what I talked about before, where hard currency wears down over time, the paper currency, if you keep the money in the vault, it won't wear down. Nothing happens to it. It just sits there being gold or silver, and then you can walk around with the promise for gold or silver, and the physical currency, the physical money doesn't wear down that way. So and it represents the same amount over time. So if you take out some old silver dollar that's worn down to half its value, but it still has a face value of $1, that's also a form of monetary debasement. So a paper note that accurately reflects 1 ounce of silver is better than a coin that is worn down to half its value. So it can be used in place of money, but it will never be real money. I have to emphasize this several times because people get confused. Paper that cannot be redeemed is worthless. If you can't turn it into money, it's worthless. Now, if you can turn it into money, nobody wants to, because the paper is a lot easier. Just keep the paper, keep the real money in a vault under tight security, and just use the paper. And it's a lot easier, and it's much more efficient and profitable just to use the paper. But if it turns out that the paper cannot be redeemed, you can very suddenly have a situation where people demand the real money all at the same time. That's known as a bank run or a hyperinflation. or a deflationary crash actually too. But we'll get into those later. Currency can be debased by printing more notes than money available to back it. And then once the debasement occurs, a reckoning is mathematically guaranteed. So if my brother gives me some gold to protect, and he says, hey, Phil, I'm going to give you some gold coins, just keep them safe for me, right? And I take an ounce of gold, and then I write 3 promissory notes on that gold, right? I've committed fraud because I wrote 3 notes for gold. I said, I got 3 ounces of gold, and I used them to buy things against my friends. And it wasn't even really my gold to loan out. Maybe my brother agreed that I could invest it. But either way, I still wrote notes against money I didn't have. When I do that, that's called fraud, and it's a felony. When banks do that, it's called fractional reserve banking, which I will get into later. But that's what every single bank does I believe, in the world right now. They loan out money they don't have. And it's going to be a reckoning on that, and it's going to be a bad one. And when a government does it, it's called inflation. Writing notes against money you don't have is a form of theft. So a reckoning is guaranteed because at some point, more than one person is going to come back with those notes and try and redeem them for money. It may take 100 years. It may take 1,000 years. I don't know how long it can take. And the system can last a long time. It's been 50 years since we went off since Nixon closed the gold window. Once that happens, once more people come for the money than there is money to redeem, the paper currency becomes worthless almost immediately. So let's go back to our caveman days and talk about the dawn of currency. Now, this is obviously fiction, but I enjoy it, and I think by simplifying it back to what fictional cavemen are doing in their ridiculous caves, makes it both amusing and is a good analogy for the modern world. So here's our good man Thrak, the gold miner, and you can see he's got the ecstasy of gold in his eyes still. But he has a problem because Crom kicked him out of the gold industry in the last episode. He took over the mining and he took over the minting. He said, Thrak no mine gold. Crom's cousin mine gold, and Crom makes the coin. So Thrak is sitting in his cave. He no longer has access to his gold fields where he used to go and dig out the gold nuggets with his hand. So he's sitting in his cave, and Thrak needs a new career. And he realizes he has a bunch of security systems, very primitive security systems set up in his little cave. Maybe some tripwires, one of those stick branches that comes and swipes at you if you trip the wire. And his cave is very secure because that's where he was storing his gold, and he didn't want anyone to steal it. So he comes up and he says, Og and Bok put gold in Thrak's cave, and Thrak protect, right? And he invents banking. He says, I'll protect the gold, and everyone in the village, Og and Bok and others can come and store their gold in my cave, and I'll protect it, and maybe I'll charge a little fee, right? And so Og and Bok come over and they deposit their Croms. They deposit their 2 Croms, one from Og and one from Bok. They both put a Crom into the Thrak's cave, and they realize that even though it's nice to have it protected, they lost the convenience of using it as currency. So Thrak comes up with a great idea, and he takes a couple of pine cones. He takes 2 pine cones, and he paints them green, and then he puts his little Thrak stick figure on them, and he gives each pine cone to Og and Bok. And those are promissory notes. So he writes promissory pinecone notes against Og and Bok's gold. He says, you guys can bring this back any time, and I will take the pinecone back and give you back your gold coin. And there's probably some kind of small fee attached to this as well, because he's got to make a profit as well. So Og and Bok walk away, and he announces this to the whole village, and Og and Bok walk away happily with their pine cones, knowing their gold is safe. And the village takes the pine cones just fine, because they know if they get the pine cone, they can walk back to Thrak and exchange it for the cromms that are sitting in the vault. So Thrack's sitting there, and he gets a little glint in his eye, which you can see right here. He gets a little gleam in his eye, and he realizes he can add a couple extra pine cones into the system, and no one will be the wiser. And I says, "Ooh, Thrack paid 2 more pine cones." And then, so he does. And then he goes out and spends those pine cones. And he buys a couple things. Right? He buys some berries, buys some goats, buys some milk, whatever he was trying to buy. And this works fine. The pine cones enter the system. But eventually, the system ends up with Ugg holding 2 pine cones and Bach holding 2 pine cones. And they meet each other. And they can count up to 10 because they got they can actually count up to 20 because they got their toes as well. But they sit there and they realize they have 4 pine cones, but they only put 2 cromms in the vault. So they march over to Thrack's, cave, and they say, "Ugg have 2 pine cones, and Bach have 2 pine cones, but Thrack no have 4 cromms." Right, and that was the world's first bank run. Because Thrack could not redeem the notes he had written with the money that he had. So let's talk about derivatives of paper currency. So paper currency is a derivative of money. It is a promise for money. Bank deposits are a promise for paper currency. So when you go to the bank and they just make a little note on their computer, they're promising you paper currency, which is itself a promise for money. So it's bank deposits are a promise for money. And then bonds is when you're loaning out your paper currency, or you could even be loaning out your bank deposits, right? So bonds, someone says, "I need to borrow your bank deposits and I will pay you back with interest later." So bonds are a promise for money. And then stocks, likewise, are an investment for money later. The only reason to invest in a company is because you want more money later than you have now. There's no other reason. There's no other reason to own any stocks in any company, right? You say, "Oh, if I put my money into this company now, it will be worth more later, and I can sell it, or it will pay dividends, it will pay dividends, and I can get more money back than I put in." So stocks are likewise a derivative of a promise for money. They're a derivative of a derivative. Cryptocurrencies are likewise such a derivative. I keep saying this over and over again, but I need to hammer the point home. Cryptocurrencies cannot be money unless they cannot be money itself. They can never be money. They could be a derivative of money if you take gold, put it in a vault, and issue cryptocurrency backed by that gold. Then it just becomes another paper currency or another digital currency. But cryptocurrencies in and of themselves are not and will never be money or anything like it. And I can do a very quick thought experiment to prove it to you. So if you go back to when gold was $35 an ounce and coffee was, let's say, 5 cents, right? And now gold is $2,000 an ounce and coffee is, let's say, $5. You could sell your Bitcoin. You could even pay in Bitcoin directly to, let's say, Starbucks if they took Bitcoin and get your coffee. But let's say the dollar hyperinflates and goes to infinity. You could still go to a Starbucks and you could shave off a little bit of gold or silver. Pay with whatever the new exchange rate is between gold and silver, because silver is the money of trade. You could take your it would be roughly about 5 cents worth of coffee. Gosh, sorry, I'm gonna have to start this part over. Cryptocurrencies are likewise such a derivative, and they are not money. I have to hammer this point home. They will never be money. And I can prove this to you logically right now. If you have, back when coffee was $35 an ounce, gosh darn it. Okay, start this over again. Cryptocurrencies are likewise such a derivative. And cryptocurrencies, I have to hammer this point home, cannot and will never be money. They will never be money themselves. And I can prove this to you logically right now. Back when gold was $35 an ounce, coffee was about 5-10 cents, as I said before, right? Let's say 10 cents. So you can do the math and you can figure out what the gold coffee ratio exchange rate was, right? That's how much coffee cost in gold terms. Now, if you go to today, you could buy right now. Coffee is about $5 at a Starbucks, I believe. A black coffee. I'm sure if you get the fancy mocha frappuccinos, they get a lot more expensive. But let's say basic coffee is somewhere between $3 and $5, something like that. If the dollar inflates to infinity, you cannot define coffee in dollar terms anymore. No Starbucks simply, or whatever coffee shop remains in the apocalypse, will not take dollars for coffee because it has no value whatsoever. Cryptocurrencies, likewise, are just derivatives of the dollar. So when the dollar hyperinflates, all the cryptocurrencies are going to hyperinflate it all. And I'm going to prove this to you right now. So back to where I was with gold and coffee, right? Coffee is still one fraction of an ounce of gold, whatever that fraction is. So in the apocalypse, in the post-apocalypse recovery, when coffee shops reopen, right, you will go to the coffee shop and you will once again pay in a fractional ounce, whatever the fraction of the ounce of gold is for the coffee. You will not be able to pay in Bitcoin because if the dollar hyperinflates, it is not possible to come up with a number to give to the coffee shop to get your coffee, right? You cannot define cryptocurrency with any value except that of dollars. So the thing, it's just like what I spoke before about fill points, right? You're going to the Starbucks and you're saying, hey, take my cryptocurrency and buy a coffee so I can buy a coffee. And the Starbucks manager is going to say, well, what's your cryptocurrency worth? How many points are you going to give me, right? And there's no way to tell. Do you give them 0.005 or do you give them 5, 50 million? There's no monetary value attached to it. It's a meaningless number. It's like you could just say, I'll give you a trillion, billion, gajillion. It means nothing because it's not attached to a real world thing. It's just a made up number. It's just like going and saying, I'll give you 5 fill points, right? And CBDCs are exactly the same. They would be the exact same derivative. Just because it's a government-issued cryptocurrency or government-issued currency doesn't mean it has any value whatsoever. It's when the dollar dies, both cryptocurrencies and CBDCs will die. All right, so this brings us to Exter's pyramid and the currency collapse. So John Exter was an economist, and he came up with this pyramid where you can see gold is at the very bottom. It's an inverted pyramid, and then paper money is on top of that, and then government bonds and treasury bills. Remember how I said, paper money is a promise for gold. Government bonds and treasury bills are a promise for paper money, which is a promise for gold, and so on and so on. If the paper money collapses, and it will, everything above it is going to collapse as well. And the holders, all the purchasing power, so all the promises that are now suddenly worthless are going to collapse. And the holders of money are going to become extraordinarily wealthy because the wealth doesn't disappear. It just collapses into the core, kind of like a dying star almost. So you might want to keep that in mind as we continue on our little monetary journey. All right, that will end it for today. I've run this video a little long, but I think it's very interesting and worth it. So I hope to see you all in the next episode. Take care.